Okay, so give me a wave if you can't hear. Thank you all for coming, and thank 14 people who are watching us online right now. My name is Heather Miller. I'm the Creative Writing Undergraduate Advisor. We're going to be joined momentarily by two members of our faculty, Professors John Vigna and Tariq Hussain, who are going to talk to you a little bit about the program as well. I'm a member of staff, so I do admin and processing. So if you did apply for the major or you're in the minor, I'm the one who kind of does things to do with registration or handling your applications and so forth. So I'm going to talk at the beginning about that kind of side of the major and our program, the formal side, the kind of rules, requirements, and so on. Professor Vigna will talk to you a little bit about the portfolio because that's such an important part of the application for our major. Professor Hussain is going to talk to you a little bit, I think, about the multi-genre nature of our program. And once we've all talked, and we're going to try not to talk too much, we'll do Q&A at the end. I do have some questions that people sent to me, so I will do those. What I do have to let you know, Arts IT sent me a huge slide, which I didn't put up. We're live streaming the event. We're not going to show any of you, but if you do stand up to ask a question, that constitutes you giving us permission to broadcast your voice. We're not going to show you faces, but we will show you voice. So if that's a problem for you, if there was a question that you really wanted to ask, you could always write it down, hand it to Andrew, and he can hand it off to one of us, if you just really don't want your voice out there. And also don't maybe lead with personal or embarrassing information if you do stand up and say something. So I shall start talking then a little bit about the structure of the program. Now, when we sent this out, we sent it to students in all levels of our creative writing programs. I'm anticipating that most of the interest is from people who are close to or thinking about applying for the major in the next application cycle, which will start in January. But what I'm saying is also applicable just for general information about our major. So most of the important things that I'm going to talk about, the rules and the requirements, are in a guidelines document, which you'll find on our webpage, creativewriting.ubc.ca. And if you go to the BFA applicant page, there's a link there. And that gives you the absolute kind of, this is what you have to do to the nth degree. So I'm going to start by saying that creative writing, we're in the Faculty of Arts, but we're a fine arts program. And that fine arts nature is reflected in our major and in our program a little bit. So if you take our major, you'll end up with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, a BFA degree. And our major is what's called a studio program. And that's really learning by doing. And often fine arts programs are like that. So if you did visual arts, you'd be painting or sculpting. Creative writing, you're going to be writing. And the studio in our case is the writing workshop. And those are small classes with a maximum of 14 people in them. And the main thing that's happening in that class is that your original writing and that of your peers in the class are the text that's under discussion and review in the room. And it's a program that's based very much on the principle of peer review. And that's not literary criticism. That's craft-based, technique-based constructive criticism back to another writer. So you're reading work and trying to help them develop it, suggesting different things that they could try, and they're doing the same thing for you. So you're learning by writing, but you're also learning by engaging very strongly with the writing process for other people as well. So in order to offer that studio major program, we've restricted all of our creative writing 400 classes, so that's why those are restricted to the major. And all but one of our 400 classes are workshop classes in the genres. So it's a little bit different, creative writing, from other programs. There isn't a progression from 100, 200, 300 to 400. We almost have two separate streams. So we have the 200s and 300s, which are the minors and freestanding electives. And then we have the 400s, which are restricted to students in the major program. And there's a clue in the fact that they're 400s, in that the other distinctive thing about our program is that it's intended for students in their third and fourth year. And it isn't only intended for students in their third and fourth year, it's restricted. It's a UBC policy requirement. We can't admit anybody into the major program who doesn't have formal third year standing at the beginning of the program. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what exactly that means. So you can't apply in your first year. You can apply towards the end of your second year because you're about to kind of move into, if you've done a full-time kind of course of studies, to third year standing. But that's a rule that we can't shift, we can't change. So even if you were to apply and to be accepted, if you didn't have formal third year standing, UBC wouldn't allow us to let you carry on in the program. So generally, third year status means that you've completed 54 full undergraduate credits. So that's why you'll see us talking about 54 credits and looking for 54 credits. And where that comes up and you're telling us that is when you make the application to our major. Because again, because we are a studio program, that means we're a selective program. So we have a very particular type of application and we have a very short window in which you can apply for the major. And that the dates for 2019 are going to be January 2nd is when applications are going to open, and then March 15th is going to be the deadline for submissions. And the applications that are made then fill our program for the 19 winter term. So September 19, you would be starting in the major.
Could you repeat the ending date?
March 15th, yeah. Yeah, so that would be a 19 winter start. So you would have to have third year standing in September of 19, which means you could be in your second year when you apply, but we're going to be looking at your record and seeing that you're going to have 54 credits generally by the end of that semester. If you are in a situation where you'd only needed 1 or 2 more courses and you were intending to take them in the summer session, we can look at that. You would need to let me as the undergraduate advisor know at the time that you apply that that's what you're planning to do. And we can then go ahead and look at your application. You would need to finish those credits. And for some of our viewers who may be watching us from BC colleges and things, I'm going to talk about transfer students a little bit later on because this is a question that comes up for them as well. So I've told you the period when we're accepting applications, that's January to March. What we ask for in the application is that you fill out an online form, which you would link to through our webpage again. And that's going to ask you questions like the credits, like the different requirements that I'm going to talk to you about. But then alongside the form, you upload 2 writing samples and a cover letter. The 2 writing samples have to be in 2 distinctive genres, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And the way that we decide who we're going to admit to the program is the faculty then, once I've gone through the applications and checked eligibility, I give all the eligible applications, the writing samples to the faculty, and they review and assess and rank those. And that's where we make the decisions about who to admit to the program. We receive far more applications than we have places. It's just the situation. Last year we got getting up to 150 applications, just over 100 of those were eligible, and we accepted 25 people into the program. And again, that's not us keeping the number artificially low, that's the number of places that we have to offer. So we have to turn away more people than we accept every year. We turn away people who are fine candidates. It's not a rejection of you and your abilities as a writer if you don't make it. Some of our students have applied once, twice, I've even heard 3 or 4 times before they get into the program. So just be assured that it is a very competitive process and it is not necessarily a judgment on your abilities if you don't make it the first time. We only have that 1 application cycle a year, so that's kind of it. You've got to get your application into us between January and March if you want to be considered. We can't look at late applications, we can't look at sort of complicated, just because of the sheer volume of applications that we have, that it becomes very unfair if we kind of give special consideration in some cases and not in others. So we invite and accept applications from students outside of UBC, and every year about roughly a quarter or so of our students are transferring into UBC. And some of our students are also applying to do a second bachelor's degree. You can do that if your first degree was in another subject. You can't do 2 bachelor's degrees in creative writing, but if you did a bachelor's degree in kinesiology, here or elsewhere, you could apply to do a second BA. The thing that we have to note very strongly and say now for anybody who is in that situation, and again, I think there's probably more people watching online, is that you have to be a UBC student to be in our major. So you have to apply to become a UBC student before you do the major application, because the UBC admission deadline is in January. It's usually around January 15th. You'll get a student number when you apply. You need to put that on your creative writing application. If you haven't done that and you haven't applied to UBC, we can't consider you because there's no way that admissions can get you in. The other question that students transferring in often have is around transfer credits and the 54 credits and so on. If you're at a recognised institution, so that would be most of the post-secondary colleges or universities in BC or across Canada, or recognised universities elsewhere, and UBC does list those for people to look at. If you've got 54 credits, you're likely to get 54 credits when you come in here. There's no 100% guarantee though, and they don't assess transfer credits until they admit you to UBC. So don't get panicked about it, because often transfer students do start to worry about this. They'll apply to UBC, they won't hear about the admission, they'll apply for the major, we'll talk to them, they'll say, but I don't know. Often admissions will wait until we give them a list of who we're accepting into the creative writing program. They will then speed up those admissions and follow up on any transfer credit situations. For students in BC, there's a site called bctransferguide.ca, which you can go to yourself and check the transfer equivalency of courses that you're taking in a BC post-secondary institution to UBC. And also you would need to go to you.ubc.ca, which is the admissions site, and that gives you all of the information about that. So the only other kind of strict requirement that I'm going to talk about is the only course prerequisite we have, as long as you've got your 54 credits or more, is that you've taken creative writing 200 or equivalent. We're very generous about what the equivalent is, because creative writing 200 is our base level foundation course. So if you've taken any UBC creative writing courses, we're going to count that for that. And for students transferring in, again, any introductory level creative writing course we will accept. And if you are in an institution that offers absolutely nothing at all, again, you can let us know that, and we'll give that special consideration. So, my two co-conspirators have showed up. I'm going to call them over, and Professor Vina is going to talk to you a little bit about the portfolio and the writing piece and faculty assessment. And Tariq Hussain will talk to you, I think, a little bit about genres, and then we'll take some general questions from the room. So. Yeah, or you could stand. Or,
yeah.
I've got your chairs and
Hi
everything.
guys, let's get this. I recognize many of you, Peter, right? Yeah. So good to see you, and it's great to hear you're going to think about applying for the BFA, which we totally encourage you to do. So some things that you're always going to ask, and I've been asked this many times when I've seen either you guys or some other people taking the 200 level, 300 level classes, is how do I make my portfolio great, or what do I need to do for the portfolio? I'm going to give you the secret right now. You ready? What do you think it is? I'll give you a chance. Huh?
Luck.
Yeah, luck.
Original,
Original? Sure. Yeah, okay. What do you mean by original?
like something that hasn't been done before, like it stands out, you read it and you're like, oh my god, I just read 200 things and it stands out.
Okay, that fresh voice. Okay, here.
Something the writer actually cares about writing.
Cares about writing? Yeah, we get that for sure. Yeah. Yes?
Something you've worked hard on.
Something you've worked hard on and you're proud of, right? Yeah. And I would agree with all of these, and I would sort of also say, and this is the difficult part to understand what it is, but submit your best work, right? So sometimes I know, it's clear as mud, right? But sometimes what's happening is we're like putting our pieces together and we're trying to tick all these boxes and stuff, and you're like, well, I think I'll put this piece of CNF in. I don't really know how I feel about it. My TA or instructor didn't know how they really felt about it. I'm going to submit it because it seems okay. But I would recommend that you submit the stuff that you really stand behind, you really believe firmly in, you love, that moves you, that feels original, that you care about, that you've put a lot of work into, all these things that you've said, right? So that's kind of the baseline rule of what to do. There is no strategy towards putting your portfolio together other than submitting your best work forward. And the way the process works is we get all the packages in. There's over 100, I think,
Yeah.
something like that. So quite a few. And then we read through them as faculty. We read all of them. All of the packages get read very carefully by all of us. And we are obviously, there's no rocket science to it. We're looking at the writing almost entirely before we look at the rest of the application. So the writing really sort of matters the most, right? And of course, that means it could, like a piece that I might really gravitate towards, Tarek might not gravitate towards as a reader. We know all this happens as readers, which is why we have more than one faculty person who's involved in the reading process. So this is how we read the portfolios. I do encourage you to pay attention, very careful attention to the guidelines that are listed on our website about what needs to go in the portfolio, the page requirements, and these sorts of things. Those are important. But if you have, for example, in fiction, I think you're allowed 20 pages to submit something. If you have one piece that's really strong and it's 12 pages and you're really happy with this page, this piece, it might be a good idea to stick with that as your piece of fiction instead of trying to pad it to meet 20 pages. 20 pages is the maximum. Okay, so I know sometimes we see portfolios, there's a strong piece in, and then the writer's almost done themselves a disservice by putting in something else that's not as strong, they didn't care about, it's not as original voice, or whatever, box you want to tick. And because they felt they needed to get those 20 pages in. Just submit your best work. We do have minimums though.
10 page minimum.
Yeah.
And that's all in the guidelines that I referred to, and it gives you those, yeah. But it's not like an academic paper where we're looking for 2,500 words exactly, so.
Yeah, so submit your best work, meet the minimum, and then you don't need to necessarily meet the maximum. Do not surpass the maximum. We're reading a lot of these things. Our eyes start to bleed after a while, and there's that. And we do want to hear your unique voices. We want to see the experiments that you're trying. There is no sort of certain type of story or genre we're ever looking for. We have such a diverse faculty. All these different voices that come in and assess the work. We're excited to see whatever excites you. So that's sort of the main thing. Now, unfortunately, your instructors can't offer you advice on your portfolio. In other words, I can't read your work prior to submitting because I'm part of all of us are reading the applications. So that's sort of part of the process too. So we don't encourage you to ask your instructors, do you mind looking at my portfolio before I submit it? Because it just puts them in an awkward position, and they can't, because you actually want fresh eyes on your work in that submission too. And then the sort of a couple of the last things were going to be, so when you're thinking about what is my best work, this is such an excellent time, as you know, going through Creative Writing 200 and then whatever genres you go into up to the 300s as you're doing that, is that you are constantly cultivating your own kind of vision and voice in your writing, whatever genre you're working in. This is another part of that process when you're putting together your portfolio. I think it's an outstanding thing to try and do. Putting together a portfolio is very challenging. You're going to be met with a lot of internal stuff that goes on doing this. We've all been there ourselves. We've done it for the jobs we have, for example, or getting into school like yourselves. But I would just say ride that out. Do whatever you need to do to sort of take care of yourself when it's stressful and you don't feel like you have anything original to say or anything like that, because everyone feels that way putting together a portfolio, because it is an assessment of what you've done so far. And I would say keep going with it, submit it, because the process of applying is often more valuable than getting into the program in many ways, because it really changes the way you view your own writing. So as you know from the numbers, it is very competitive. Many of our students have got in on their second or even third try, and of course many have gotten in on their first, so it doesn't really mean anything one way or the other. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, guys, when you're applying, if you don't get in, I like to say this to my students, is that we don't get the power to say you don't get to write, right? You'll continue to write and just apply again, or maybe school's not your thing. Maybe you'll write books. There are plenty of published authors out there who write without going through formal school too. So it's not, it doesn't mean that sort of thing to you, okay? Do you have any specific questions about the portfolio right now? Yes?
So can you submit things that you already wrote like 2 years ago?
Is it your best work?
If it was, then you could.
Yeah.
Even if it was written in high school and you slightly changed it?
Yes. You can submit any of your own original work as long as you feel it's your strongest work. Yeah. You can submit work, of course, from classes that you've taken with any instructor here.
The only restriction is that it's not collaborative work in any way. So it's
Yes.
got to be purely your work, but wherever you feel the best work comes from, that's what.
Yeah. Good question, though. Yeah. Any others on portfolio assembly? Yeah. Published work? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Absolutely. If you've won a high school contest, sure. Or something in university, sure. Right?
Pulitzer.
Pulitzer, you know, the Nobel. I'm sure there's at least one or two of you in here. Yeah, submit that. Don't hide your best stuff. Yeah. Start early too, right? When's the deadline?
March 15th. Yeah.
Start early, guys. Don't start on March 14th. You will not have fun. You want to submit your best work, right? Yeah. Okay, Tarek, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, hey everybody, I'm Tarek. Like John, I think I recognize a few faces in the crowd, so that's very cool, and it's great to see that you guys are applying. I just have a few words to say about genre. When you're in the program, you're required to take 4 genres. So that's something to be kind of clear about what you'd be working towards. So you may have your favorite genre that you really always naturally like to work in, but then there are choices for you to explore something that you may even think is not your super strong suit. And I guess part of my role here is to kind of encourage you to do that, or encourage you to feel good about doing that. I teach a genre that's, I think it's a popular genre because I love it. I teach songwriting, but I know it's a bit of a niche genre, and some people get very intimidated by it because they think, well, I don't sing, or I don't play guitar, I don't write songs, I don't know how to do that, so I'm just going to avoid that. But I will say that I have had students take my classes originally walking in thinking they didn't have any idea about how to ever write a song, and actually, do excellent work, and really grow and thrive. And sometimes walking out of the end of the class with a feeling that they really wanted to continue doing songwriting as something, that's like at the top of their list, rather than something they never even thought about doing before. So there is some value if when we say that you have to explore all these other genres, if you're feeling like, why can't I just write short stories? That's what I really want to do. Well, you can do that, but there's value. You may discover something that you never thought that you'd be interested in, and it becomes something that you're really good at, or that you really become good at, or you put some extra time in to develop your skills on. The other thing I will say about genres, and I've noticed this just through my own creative work, that because I also write creative nonfiction, and there are kind of lines that weave together, like each genre communicates with the other. Certainly, if you think about poetry or songwriting, you can probably sense the parallels there. But if you were really interested in poetry, it might be a very natural thing to take a songwriting class. But even if you're taking nonfiction and you think, I'll take a songwriting class, those two have, they talk to each other as well. There's ways about putting true stories in songs, for example, and how do you do that, and how do you address point of view in doing that. So a lot of times when you're working in one genre, there's a benefit to working in a bunch of other ones, because they will in fact inform each other. in a lot of ways. I think that's really what I mostly had to say about that. Just again, to kind of encourage you to keep an open mind and feel good about that fact that you get to try and do a bunch of different things in the actual program. But does anyone have any questions about genre? Yeah.
Not about genre.
Okay.
What's the GPA requirement, minimum GPA requirement?
Minimum GPA requirement, I'll turn that over to.
We don't, we're not looking at your grades, so it's a relief.
It's the
No,
writing.
It's the
Yeah.
writing. So, you have to have completed 54 credits, so obviously you've got that far, right? And then we check off that you've got creative writing 200 or equivalent, but we're not looking at your grades or your GPA. That really isn't a factor. The faculty are reading and assessing the writing, and that's where we're making decisions, so.
Which is pretty awesome, if you ask me. Not that we're reading the stuff, and I'm talking about the grades don't factor in, right?
Because
We-
your grades can come from like different courses, different things. different-
Well, many of us come from spotty academic histories ourselves. Maybe not the best grades when we were undergrads. Pointing to myself mostly here, but you know, when maybe you're really strong at writing, maybe you know how to write a great poems or something like that. And there's like a community for you to sort of be welcomed into, that you're not, the barrier is not grades. It's good writing, unique voices that we were always looking at, right? And I, you know, just to give that a plug further, is like, it's pretty awesome being in a program, a closed program that you've earned a seat into through the rigorous process of putting together a portfolio. And now you're with 25, 30 of your crew, right? Just your people that just really, you know, get into reading, writing, discussing the stuff. It's pretty awesome, guys. I highly recommend applying at least. You never know. You never know, right? I think also he was selling songwriting pretty hard in his time. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, Tarek,
Tarek, yeah.
sorry.
That's okay.
So earlier you were strongly suggesting that that we as students be versatile or adaptable or open-minded in choosing our classes here, because the classes, I guess, are wildly different in genre, right? My question is, would you apply that same kind of open-mindedness when you choose the submissions, when you apply? Like, for example, short story and a song.
It's a great question. I mean, I think it goes back to what you were saying. Submit your strongest work, right?
Yeah.
So I don't sense that there's a need that you have to show diversity in your portfolio. Or, I mean, maybe you'd speak better to that.
2 genres, and we'll look at them, whichever they are. But yeah, and your strongest work. And I think, I don't know, but do you want to talk about maybe, we're looking for potential as well, right? So it's not perfection that
Yeah.
so if you've written a song and that's not your thing, but you're like, hot damn, this is worth somebody having a look at, and you've got that feeling about it.
Yeah, I mean, just that excitement that, I mean, we read a lot, right? This is what we do, and when we come across something that is really, really exciting, and just like we know you're trying something out, and we see that through some of your other pieces that you're really sort of, you've got a voice that's developing, that sort of thing. Yeah, I guess, you know, just echo what Heather's saying here, is that you do not need to be like the most accomplished writer to get a seat in this program. You do not have to win awards or to have publications or any of those things. There are many fine writers, most of you, in fact, that can do that without that kind of exterior stuff, right? So your best work in multiple genres is great. But a minimum 2 genres.
Right.
Yeah.
But sorry, there's no maximum.
For the submission, because it's what they can read. So submissions in 2 genres, and then once you're admitted to the program, you have to take courses in at least 4 separate genres. Now, one of them you can just take one time, and that counts for that. But and it's one of the distinctive things about the UBC creative writing program, is that it gives you the chance. There's almost, I don't think there is another program that has as many different genres.
Not,
And especially at an undergraduate level. I mean, it's a real opportunity to stretch yourself and try different things. So
There was a hand over here before.
Oh, I was just asking about, because you said you're required to write in 4 different genres. Are there any like rules for like restrictions on how many people can choose like a certain genre? Because you're only allowing so many people in. Is there any restrictions on only this many people can do this genre?
no,
Is there like caps on it?
no, we don't do quotas per genre. Y- Sorry, he's flashing things at me. I don't know what he's saying.
Repeat the question.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
right.
All right, sorry. Now I've lost track completely
So
of what I
the
was
question
saying.
is,
Oh, yeah.
do we have
Yeah.
quotas in each of the
No,
genres?
no, we don't. You can take, say fiction is your thing, you can take up to 12 credits in fiction in the course. We don't guarantee you, particularly because you all know how registration works, right, at UBC. So the students in their final year get the first crack at kind of registration. So we say we can't guarantee you a spot, but we do offer all the genres, so you can take that as many times. And we do keep an eye on it. And if for whatever reason it's a poetry year and we've got a ton of poetry people, we may add an extra poetry workshop. So you'd never be prevented from doing a genre because too many other people are doing it. No.
Yeah, but sort of to get at the subtext of your question, if you are your strongest as a poet, but your fear is that there's going to be many poetry submissions for that, and you're going to go with like a songwriting submission because you feel there maybe are going to be less applications that way, and you want to sort of apply with that as your main genre, that's not advisable because there are no quotas. We are looking for the strongest writing. Yeah.
And
So don't try to play the game.
these guys are really good, and they kind of know when people are doing that. They can often read a screenplay and know that it was started off as something else or whatever. So
Just submit your best work in your genres, guys. Here.
With regard to the cover letter on the application, I've always been confused with what it's supposed to be because the guideline says, I think it basically just says discuss your publications. So I've always been very confused with what it's.
that's a fantastic question because we're right in the middle of revising the.
Do we need to repeat that question?
The question was about the cover letter and that the guidelines don't give a great deal of direction about what we're looking for in the cover letter and seem to just say, tell us what you've published. And I'm saying that's a great question because we had a meeting this morning where we're working actively right now on updating and refining the language about what we do want in the cover letter. So that will be within the guidelines within the next kind of few weeks, couple of weeks. We've just got to tweak it a little bit. But I think Tarek can probably talk a little bit about the cover letter
Yeah.
because we want to know who you are for that letter, right?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think that's it. Like, it will be like we're working on the phrasing so that it will have a little more eloquence and clarity, I think, to it. But essentially, getting to know who you are and I mean, obviously, some of your experience so far, you'd want to put that in there as well. But I think getting a sense of your personality and all of that. And we are, we're looking for a diverse community of writers, and so there's a piece about that in the description and so forth. So, yeah, I can understand that maybe what you've been given so far, and that's why we worked on it, hasn't been very, very good. Like, hasn't given you a lot of clarity. I think this version will give you enough to go on, so you won't be so much in the dark about what should go in that letter. I think it'll be a lot clearer and tighter for you.
And I think just to add on to that, because they are stressful, writing cover letters for jobs, right, generally. And I would say if you can strike the balance between being who you are, but also being can we use the word professional in this situation, right? So in other words, spell check it, make sure there's no, first impressions always count. It's not a deal breaker for looking at the writing itself, but, generally in your entire package, spell check the thing, right? Make sure that it's just clean and well presented. That shows that you put a lot of care into putting your cover letter and your package together. So, but don't try to. I think it wouldn't be good to pretend you're someone you're not in your cover letter, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very true.
I think we can sort of smell that a mile away too.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you feel good, right? I'm not saying you specifically, but like as an individual, right?
Is there like a spacing or like a font standard for this edition? Like, do you have to make it double
Yeah.
spaced or, can you choose?
It's all in the guidelines. So the question, sorry, I've now been told it, I repeat so the question's about spacing and font sizes and just kind of formatting. That is all in the guidelines. Basically, 12 point-ish in a kind of standard body text. So Arial, Calibri, Times New Roman, whichever one you're most comfortable dealing with. Unless, I did say to a student last year, unless you were writing concrete poetry or something that required you to use a particular font. But generally you want it to be readable, so 12-point readable text. Single-spaced most of the options, but look, each genre has slightly different rules. And for example, if you're doing a screenplay, they want professional formatting. So whatever is appropriate for the genre, and it will tell you in the guidelines. Yeah.
Yeah, don't do crazy things like wingdings or comic MS right in your fonts. Yeah.
Is fiction single-spaced?
I'm trying to remember, I think so. Or it might, cover letter single
Is
space.
it double spaced? Yeah, that's what I thought.
So you
yeah.
guys should be hosting this session.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, definitely look at those requirements.
Yes.
Is it full-time or part-time or flexible, like the program, once you get it, given that you?
Within reason, it's flexible, and I keep meaning to double check, and I haven't, because somebody else has asked me this question. We do have we have students who are double majoring. We also do have students who are doing it on a slower. They're doing it in a part-time way. We also do have students, example, who've done an exchange in the middle of it, so they're stretching it out over more time. You have to be sure that you get it done within whatever UBC's kind of general rules are for completing a degree. And for an undergraduate degree, I know for an MFA, it's 5 years. I'm not entirely sure, like from start to finish, how much time UBC will give you, but you can stretch it out a little bit. The program's designed to be completed within 2 years, 2 full-time years, but you're not doing just creative writing because of the workshop is so intense. You're restricted to 3 workshops per term, and that's 9 credits basically in creative writing each term, 36 total for the whole of the program. So you can spread that out, yeah. But
For those of us in third year who were not accepted into the BFA, but are still taking the undergrad classes, they're, I guess, for minors. If we do get in fourth year, do those classes fully transfer, as we did it?
good question, because it's on my sheet here of questions. So the question was for students who are going into, say, their 4th year and are reapplying to the program or applying now for the first time in their 4th year, and obviously have been at university now for quite a while. Can they use other courses to count towards the major? That's what you were asking, right?
Well, specifically
The creative writing 300 courses that you've done. No, is the short answer. You have to do 36 credits of 400 level creative writing courses for the major. So there isn't a shortcut with that, I'm afraid. And the same thing if you're double majoring. It's the 36 credits in creative writing, 400 courses are required.
But that's not such a bad thing because you get more opportunities to write, you get more opportunities to take courses with cool people like yourselves and instructors too. And if you're going into a BFA in writing, it shows that you have a real interest in writing, so you want to be doing as much of it as you can. So although nothing can transfer over from those 300 or 3.5 courses, taking those courses in your 3rd year, if you're still trying to get in the BFA, are really beneficial because, I mean, what I've always noticed with your cohort is when you go through, say, 200 level courses, your writing's like kind of here, let's say. In the 3.0 courses, your writing's definitely improved. But if you take a 3.5 course, it's like that almost like really quadruples. And the reason is because you're having more practice. You're having more opportunity to engage with the material with, in smaller classes each time out. And so that's almost setting the stage for when you're in the BFA, those 3-5 courses are basically modeled off how the BFA is, except for the class is half the size when you enter a 400 level. So it's all, I guess what I'm saying to add to what Heather said is it's all good to do that. It's just, yeah, you have to take more courses, but it's actually really good for you as a young artist. Yeah.
One last question.
Yeah.
I think most of us here are English majors who, for whatever reason, can't get into the MFA or BFA.
You just want to escape English is what you want to do.
Right. This is a question for each of you. Would you say that having an English degree is just as good as a great writing?
Highly personal. Highly personal decision, right? Are either of them employable? Depends what you do with it. But I'll tell you one thing, either one of those things will give you is like two of the most sought skills that all employers are looking for. The ability to write and the ability to communicate verbally. And whether you do it through English or creative writing, those are in demand in the workplace. Just talking about soft skills, but they're the ones, if you look at the research online now, is that's what employers will take every single time over somebody who is particularly skilled in that particular skill set. The ability to write, the ability to communicate verbally. So I think you just go where your heart is.
And also, and I cannot remember the number, so it's not going to be a very impressive story, but all us advisors did some stuff earlier this year, and the guest speaker from Stanford University was talking about exactly that. And the percentage of people who 10 years after graduating are working in the field that they got a degree in is minuscule. So your life's a huge adventure, and this is kind of one piece of it. So you could be going in all sorts of different directions. So don't hold yourself back necessarily for that now. And also, some other creative writing skills, creative problem solving, working with other people, collaborative working, team working, all of those sorts of things. Science students are they're trying to get that into their curriculum because they don't do those things. And that's what you're doing every single day in creative writing. So soft skills galore.
What is the research component to the program?
The question is, what is the research component to the courses?
No, we have a research requirement that we have to take.
It's a trick question for creative writing. They always give creative writing students, they cover off the research component with one of your creative writing 400 classes. So any of you who've spent time looking at your degree navigator and you've got to do that research component, if you're in the major, it's fine. They will just apply one of the 400s that you've done against that and cover that off for you. So you're good for that, yeah.
So if you're in a BA right now, and then you apply and get in, do you have to separately apply for a BFA and then also get into the creative writing major so that you're confirming with someone that you're switching?
No, okay, so is that a double major question, or you want to shift from?
Is applying to the program enough to
Yeah.
just change your
Yeah.
degree from BA to BA?
Okay, so the question is about kind of degree credentials and which program you're in and what do you have to do to apply. Basically, applying for the creative writing major is all you need to do. And if you're accepted into the creative writing program, part of what I then am doing is working with admissions and enrollment services to change your status, to get you switched to being a BFA, and all of those things. So you don't have to do anything. The reason I was asking about the double major question is that we do have a number of students who are doing double majors, which is entirely possible to do. It can add extra time because that can be quite challenging, and you're going into our degree program in your third year or beyond. If you're doing English and creative writing as two majors, because they're both within the Faculty of Arts, but one's a BA and one's a BFA, you get to choose what you want to graduate with. So you can graduate with a BFA or with a BA. We do occasionally have students who are double majoring in other faculties, and again, I'm talking more for perhaps some of our online people. That gets more complicated, and if that is something that interests you or you're curious about, you need to go and talk to your faculty advisors in science or education or whichever faculty it is to find out if you might need permission and how you can do that. We'll look at your application, but we can't guarantee that you'll be able to do that as a double major. So,
Yes.
Question in the back, yeah.
I was wondering, I bet you could do 3 workshops a semester, so is everything by semester? Like, if you wanted to go on exchange, there are no like full year courses that would stop, like, prevent you from doing that?
yes, we have the only full year courses that we still have in creative writing are our stage courses, 406 and 457, I think. Because they're tied into the Brave New Playwrights Festival of Plays, which are put on in the spring, those are full year courses. So if stage was what you really wanted to do, that might be something that you would want to think about. And generally, that would be, so you do 406 in your first year, and then 457 is the more advanced version, which is cross-taught with the MFA students in stage. So that might be a challenge, but everything else at the moment is a 3-credit, 1-semester course.
For the portfolio, are there any restrictions regarding subject matter?
For the portfolio, are there any restrictions regarding subject matter? Do you mean the topic that you might write about?
Anything that you guys will want to have?
Yeah, you know, that is a great question. And, you know, maybe one we will continue to talk about as a faculty about that sort of thing. Right now, we don't currently have any guidelines or restrictions around subject matter that can be included in the portfolio. So from a strict sort of a perspective of what's in the handbook right now, we don't have that stated. However, the thing again I would sort of encourage you towards is if you're going to write about something that feels near and dear to you to write about, not necessarily from your life, but like if you're writing fiction, for example, that feels very important for the characters to be involved in X world according to the subject matter, then I think we will see that this is absolutely part of the world that's being created rather than feeling like something that's gratuitous, right? And I think that's the sort of thing you always want to avoid anyways in writing, is it's got to feel very rooted into the piece that you're writing, the intent for it too. But as far as subject matter goes, I do not believe we have any guidelines on that. So yeah, we probably would raise an eyebrow if you're writing fan fiction. I think that's something that's generally not very well received by our department at this point. But and I guess if you have concerns or you're not quite sure, like my sort of murky answer to you is not offering enough clarity, the wisest thing to do is when you're considering submitting material and you're not sure, is just to contact Heather, and she'd be able to offer, like, with, I'm thinking about submitting a piece about this. Is this okay? And I think that's never a bad idea. Now you're going to get a ton of emails. I'm worried.
I have a question related to that. So, currently I'm taking a screenwriting class, and, well, one of the restrictions for subject material is that we cannot do, school shootings.
Yeah.
For, I guess, you know, it's a very topical, thing right now.
Yeah.
But also very, very controversial. But I just wanted to know offhand what you guys think about submitting, if it's dismissal of that.
Yeah, you know, again, it's the same in my course. There's no, it's just like, we want you to take risk and everything like that, but there are certain things not to write about, and that school shootings is one, same with screen. I guess the question asked is, how would this exploration of a school shooting be necessary for the piece that you're doing? So we're not wanting, we are in an academic environment, which is why we can't have this in the day-to-day classroom, these sorts of pieces coming up for obvious reasons. For a portfolio base, you'd have to be very clear with yourself why this piece is taking place in such a setting, for it to be executed in such a way that it would show up as very strong fiction, nonfiction, whatever the piece would be. Hopefully not nonfiction. Yeah, and again, I feel like I'm kind of dancing around the answer to basically say no, to school shootings, but again, we don't have this stated in the handbook right now, so. But, you know, again, consider your readers. Your readers are us times, you know, 15 or whatever. How many people are we? 20 or so, right?
Yeah.
And you know, if we see school shooting pieces, it needs to be very clear that this isn't some gratuitous sort of exploration of it. It needs to feel very rooted to character, to all these things that you're learning in your courses. Yeah.
Another restriction, we cannot, in that class, we can't write about the teachers themselves, so probably bad idea to write about that.
Bad idea, yeah. Bad idea.
So just for the camera,
When you're writing your, when
Don't
you're
write
wri-
about the
don't write about us.
teachers.
Yeah, when you're writing your memoirs one day and you're rich and famous, sure. But
Yeah.
only say good things. Yes.
This is a hypothetical scenario.
I don't know. You guys love the hypotheticals.
Imagine, like when I saw two pieces, one is like the best piece, like in the pile, and the other one is like the worst piece. So what's gonna happen in that scenario? If you really love one of my pieces, but then you get which one to go with, are you gonna reject it because it's the bad one? You're gonna accept it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So you need two. Are you gonna go with the best, or are you gonna go with the average of two?
Becomes very subjective. Oh, man.
Are you
I
talking?
mean-
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't know. I mean,
I think you answered this one.
me? You gotta put me on the spot. I mean, it does tie a little bit of what you were saying earlier to, you know, if you do, for you to do the due diligence of like assessing your own work, of putting your best foot forward and not padding it with something that you thought was, you know, maybe not your strongest work, but to fill up page count. Now, maybe what you're talking about is you thought they both were awesome.
And one happened to be awesome, the other one is just abysmal. But like, it's just two
Mhm.
different genres. For example,
Right.
a little bit of fiction, hypothetically,
Right,
but I suck at like songwriting.
right,
But then
yeah,
I think that I'm really good, so I submit one, and like from a scale of 0 to 100,
yeah.
I'm 100, like you get
Yeah.
100%, and then the other one gets 0%. Am I gonna be a 50% person to you, or am I gonna be 100% because of my best piece? How are you gonna like weigh that?
It does become a little subjective. I mean, I think we're definitely aware of the strength of a genre, you know, and understand that, you know, that if you're submitting diverse genres, that probably you may have a leaning to be stronger in one. I mean, then there are other things to look at, like the letter. There are other, you know, there are other factors
we look
that we
at,
start to
yeah,
consider.
we
too.
aggregate ranking, but then we also look at the separate genre rankings.
So it's a holistic.
It's very complicated.
Yeah.
But that's
And you're-
good, because it gives lots of opportunities, so that in the scenario that you're describing, one very strong genre and piece, for example, that's 12 pages long, and then you submit in a second genre that's not as strong, then when we look at the aggregate, then it allows you that voice to be sort of recognized as such for potential, for the strength of the writing, all these other factors, right? Yeah.
Oh, I did
Good
have one question that was sent, which may not resonate much with the room, but the person I think is watching and really did want me to ask it. So, and wrote, how does a mature student know whether to apply for a BFA in creative writing or whether they should track to doing an MFA in creative writing? And then was curious about the differences between the two programs. So first of all, mature students, more than welcome. We certainly have had mature and do have some mature students in the BFA, and we do want a very diverse program. The more voices, the better it is for all of you and the program to have that diversity. So please apply for the BFA. But one is an undergraduate degree, the other is a graduate degree. The MFA program has a thesis piece, which is a kind of sustained piece of writing. Also, our MFA program, can I say it's world-renowned? It's world-renowned. So
So is the BFA.
even, and well, so is our BFA, but very, very competitive. And the MFA, you're opened up to the whole universe applying for that program. And very often the MFA tends to be people a little bit, it's not often people coming straight out of undergraduate university into an MFA program. Sometimes it is, but often it's people with a little bit more experience and different things going on. So the related piece to that, which sometimes comes up with students who come and talk to me about applying for the major, because this is part of their life plan that they want to do an MFA later on, and if they don't get into the major, it's not the end of any, because like our BFA doesn't look at grades, MFAs also take students from all sorts of backgrounds. So you're not restricted because you haven't done a BFA from later on doing an MFA or some other kind of creative writing program. So hopefully that dealt with that.
There were some other hands. Did you all get a chance to have all your questions asked? Yes,
Are you able to apply to other creative writing programs at the same time? Is it
absolutely. The question,
Yeah.
sorry, the question is, are you allowed to apply to other creative writing programs at the same time, like multiple submissions? Absolutely. That's the smart thing to do if you're planning on relocating or going to other schools.
Are there ones at the same level you think?
Nope. The question is, are there others that are at the same level as UBC for BFAs? There are. I mean, you have to do your research on obviously on Google and whatever, but the difference with our program, and it is a world leader in this one, is the multi-genre requirement, and there are some other BFA programs in Canada. There's one in Victoria, for example, and they're a pretty strong program too, but you have to just sort of go with what would feel like the right fit for you as a student, as both the environment you're in and the types of courses they offer too. So that's pretty easy to do with some easy sort of research online.
So if we're sort of wrapping up, I brought my card, which I always hate because I don't feel like a card sort of person, but please grab one if you want one. The guidelines, as I said, with the cover letter, we're still refining a few little pieces, but that is linked to from our webpage. And that's going to be the kind of Bible of putting together an application. But if you're stuck and you're like, I just don't understand this bit, or how does this apply to me, I would be your kind of first port of call. If I can't answer the question or somebody else ought to, I will direct you to that person. So please take my card if you're interested in that. For people watching, it's crr.undergrad@ubc.ca is the email address to reach me with any other questions that you did have. So thank you. Thank
Make
you all
sure
for
you
coming.
apply, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.